I want to welcome you to this study of the seven churches of Asia Minor. We've been taking and laying a background for the last several weeks, and if you haven't had an opportunity, go ahead and listen to that background first, because a background is like a foundation, and you will have a whole lot greater understanding of what Jesus is going to say to these churches if you'll start out with the foundation. So go back to those prior videos and listen to them, and then come back here as we begin the study of the church at Ephesus. Now, again, before we go into the church at Ephesus, let's just get a little bit of a background into the church at Ephesus. The city of Ephesus itself was a port city on the western part of Asia Minor, or what we would call Turkey today. And this city was, because it was a port city, it was a city that had a huge influx of people, a huge influx in and out into the city. I had a wonderful, wonderful missiology teacher in Bible college, and his name was Dr. John Garlock. Wonderful, wonderful man. But he said, you know, when you go into an area, you need to find a people pump. He said, find a place, find a city where people come into and go out of. And that was one of the principles that he taught us in missiology. Well, when the Apostle Paul came to Ephesus, he was finding that exact same place. But because Ephesus was a people pump, because it was people that were coming in and going out, there was all kinds of strange ideologies, strange religions taking place in the city of Ephesus. You know, when the Apostle Paul got there, he had to deal with demonic spirits that were in that city, and especially the Greek god Diana. He had to deal with it. He had to cast out demons, and he had to confront these demon-possessed people. And he got into trouble for it, by the way. So the city of Ephesus was a port city. It was also a very prosperous city, because along with the people comes the money. So the money comes in and the money goes out, comes in, goes out. But the city of Ephesus was a very prosperous city. It was called the gateway to Asia. And it was, in many ways, the gateway to Asia Minor. If you were going to go and trade in Asia Minor, Ephesus was the major trade port that you would start with to get into the rest of Asia Minor. Now, the population was somewhere between 250,000 and 500,000 at the time of John writing this. And it had a lot of organized crime. It had a lot of just wickedness, is probably the best way of putting it. There was a 24,000 seat theater in Ephesus. I mean, so they were into the arts, they were into things like that. And again, if you can just understand, this was a very cosmopolitan type of city. It had everything going in and everything going out: arts, philosophy, religions. Everything was happening in the city of Ephesus. Now, Jesus is going to write to this city, and he's going to talk to this church in the city of Ephesus. Now, the Apostle Paul started the church in the city of Ephesus. We can go to Acts 19, verse 9, and it says, "And when some were becoming hardened and disobedient, speaking evil of the way before the people, he withdrew from them and took away disciples, reasoning daily in the school of Tyrannus." What did Paul do? This is after Paul had already started the church, but Paul actually made the city of Ephesus the hub of Christianity, or at least the hub of Christianity as far as the Gentiles were concerned. Now, we can study and find out, of course, the church started in Jerusalem, and then all of a sudden we see the church rising up in Antioch, and that's where Paul and Silas and Barnabas were sent out of Antioch. But now there's been a change, and Paul brings a Bible school to a city. You see, Bible schools are very essential in reaching an area because it trains up and raises up the leaders for that area. So Paul started the school of Tyrannus, and Paul begins to pour himself into these people in the city of Ephesus. Now let's go back and look at some of the things that happened. We can go back to Acts 18, verses 18 through 21, and Paul says, I'm having remained many days longer, took leave of the brethren and put out for the sea for Syria, and with him Priscilla and Aquila. And in Caesarea he had his haircut, and for he was keeping a vow, and he came to Ephesus, and he left them there. For now he himself entered the synagogue and reasoned with the Jews, and they asked him to stay longer, and he did not consent. Taking leave of them, he says, I will return if God's will, and set sail from Ephesus. You see, Paul was very, very connected with the church at Ephesus. And Paul had found Aquila and Priscilla. They were a Jewish couple, and they were teaching the word of God, and Paul took them and began to train them. And then they're traveling with Paul, and Paul leaves them in the city of Ephesus. They were a very vital part of the structure and of the beginning of the church in Ephesus. Paul returns to Ephesus, and he begins to work there. He begins to teach there, and he begins to raise up the church in Ephesus. Now, let me just take just a minute. And by the way, if you would like all the notes that we have on the 7 churches of the book of Revelation, go to the website at the end of this video and ask us for those notes. You'll find our email address there to the office, and ask us for these notes. So I'm kind of hurrying here, but there were many miracles that happened in the city of Ephesus. There were many things that took place. In Acts, the 19th chapter, verse number 12, it says, so that the handkerchiefs and aprons were carried from his body to the sick, and the disease left, and the evil spirits went out. These were extraordinary miracles that were happening in the life of the Apostle Paul. So we see that the city of Ephesus and the church at Ephesus was a powerhouse. It was the center of Gentile Christianity at that time. And so we need to have this understanding as we look into the teaching and into the instruction that Jesus gives to the church at Ephesus. I hope that you join us again tomorrow as we get into what Jesus said to the church at Ephesus.